The Honourable Nick Smith.
Mr Chairman, firstly I want to join with the Prime Minister and members of the House who have made their tributes to the passing of Lady Riha Mahuta, and want to acknowledge in my work as the Minister for the Environment and working with her particularly on the issue of the Waikato River, I know that she is a person that will be deeply missed, but also one who has made a huge contribution not just to Waikato Tainui, but also to New Zealand. Mr Chairman, this bill puts into effect a settlement for an issue that has actually been quite divisive in my own community of Nelson around the whole issue of the foreshore and seabed. Aquaculture is very much a new industry, and if we reflect on the Parliament and the big debates that occurred in the early years of this Parliament about land law, more recently debates around fishing, this in my view is the latest of those resource issues that we need to work through in a considered way. I think most of us would regret the way in which the gold rush for marine space got away a bit in areas like the Marlborough Sounds and in Tasman Bay, that gave rise to a huge sense of grievance from Maoridom that led to the very divisive issue over the foreshore and seabed. And I hope in considering this bill we can actually lay some of the foundation for the more contentious way this Parliament has to find a way through that more difficult challenge of the foreshore and seabed. I think it's also worth noting that while we went through the sort of gold rush era in the 80s and 90s around the development of aquaculture, we then went to the opposite end with the moratorium, and this bill actually comes about because of the failure of policies in the last decade to actually provide for aquaculture space. When the agreement was reached with Maoridom that 20% of aquaculture space would be made available, it was intended that Maori would get that space from new areas that were being created. And what actually happened was that the 2005 aquaculture legislation did not live up to its promise, did not get the incentives right, and so the essence of this bill is to provide an alternative mechanism, effectively through the payment of cash by the Crown, to those iwi in areas that had particular high development of aquaculture. So while I support this bill and see it as a pragmatic response to a problem and a way through, the more critical debate this Parliament is going to have to deal with is to reconfigure those aquaculture laws so that we can actually grow the wealth of that. The fact that this bill has very broad support through the House. It is important for those communities, particularly in the top of the South Island that I'm privileged to represent, and also in the Coromandel, but it is very much a stopgap measure to deal with the issue of aquaculture space that has previously been provided, get some money into the hands of iwi so that they can invest and be part of the industry. But if this bill is really to deliver on the expectation of Parliament that we're able to sort out those aquaculture laws so that this is an industry that can grow and grow without the sort of gold rush that we had in the 1990s, and that will be a difficult balance for this Parliament to address, but one that we must urgently do if we're to move from cleaning up the mess to looking forward around the future of aquaculture and particularly the Maori involvement in that important industry.
I call Calvin Davis.